Let me open this up. It was funny, like, so I made this last year and then totally forgot about it and never used it for anything. So I'm like, you know what? I want to put it in my talk because I might as well use it for something. I think we were going to use it for some like advertising around campus, and we ended up using something else. So I like made it and it didn't do anything. So I'm like, oh, I'll just use it for. I might as well use it for something. Not let it go to waste. All right. So my thoughts for this particular talk were, if you're familiar with SPSS or even any programs like Excel or well, not Excel so much, but anything where it's like we have a graphic interface like SPSS or SAS and stuff, where there's some point and click options that will generate output for you. A lot of people, when they learn that way, they're sort of afraid of leaving that comfort and going to like more syntax-based or syntax-focused approaches. And so the way that I was one of those students that learned, it's super cold. It seems like it's warming a little bit here, like open the doors up, it seems like some of the cold air is going out. So
yeah.
Maybe to warm up some. We're having some parkas brought in from downstairs. One of the ways, so if you saw like the talk this morning with the panel, I don't think people were there. Yeah. But so my talk was basically like I came to data science sort of accidentally. I didn't really intend on becoming like a statistician. It just sort of happened. And I look back and I think, wow, that was really weird. It started because of a friend of mine's girlfriend talking me taking a class that I didn't want to take, and I took it and she dropped it. And I stayed in and ended up doing really well in it. So just a series of strange sort of happenstance or kismet sort of thing. But because of that, I teach a lot of stats courses, and students are like, "Oh, you're a math guy," and I'm not. I don't have a math background. I would have told you 20 years ago that I hated math and wanted nothing to do with it. So because of that, I do have a pretty good. I'm pretty good at trying to make this stuff approachable because I had to do it for myself. It makes sense. I had to find ways of making stuff that I didn't like likable, right? So one of the ways that I was able to do that when dealing with SPSS, I liked SPSS. It was learning it, the sort of point and click stuff in SPSS. I liked it because it's point and click and got output. It was great. But as soon as you had to deviate from any of those sort of simple point and click stuff, I quickly realized it was really difficult to do without going into syntax. And then once I learned syntax, I realized it was actually a lot easier to do stuff, especially if you wanted to automate things and make things sort of more regular, to switch to syntax. But it took me a long time to get there, and it took me a long time of like convincing myself that it was okay to sort of go into that sort of realm. So one of the things I want to do, so this is really an R talk, but the first thing I wanted to do was one thing you should do is if you're using something like SPSS is to get comfortable with the SPSS code. So even though you're doing your point and click stuff to run analyses in SPSS, in the background, it's generating syntax. You just don't see it because most people don't want to see it, so they don't look at it. So there are ways that you can actually look at the syntax and see what's actually happening and start to get familiar with the code that's built in the SPSS. And then what I would tell you to do is get a code, have SPSS generated code, and then start to mess with it. How do I make it so this code doesn't work? Why do I say that? It sounds weird. Why would I want to make my code not work? Because that's how you figure out how to make it work again. If you can figure out how to break a code and then fix it again, that's like most of coding, right? You're doing some code doesn't work and you have to figure out how to make it work again. But same thing. I learned about cars by having a car that didn't work. I learned about computers when my parents had an old computer that never worked right, so I took it apart to figure out how to make it work again. So it's like not being afraid of breaking stuff is what I'd say. Like, be in there and break it and then fix it again. So that's the getting comfortable. Then we'll talk about make sure that you have R and R Commander, and we sort of did that already. If you don't have it, I can still show you where it is. I can show you how to get there. And then just going through sort of R Commander, looking at the differences between the SPSS interface and this thing called R Commander. R Commander is just an overlay on R. It looks sort of like SPSS. It gives you some point and click options. And it does some things, I think, better than SPSS does, and then there are certain things that SPSS does better, but we can talk about that.
And then we can go through and do some runs in SPSS and R and look at the differences. And if we have time, I could talk a little bit, because R Markdown is built into the R Commander. We can talk about how that works. And then this thing called knitter, it's also built into R Commander to make your output look nice and neat and tidy. That's one of people's complaints about R, is that compared to SPSS, the output is not very fancy. It's just text, and like tab text, in a box, as opposed to being a nice, tables that you can flip and rotate and stuff. It doesn't do those kind of things in R, at least not in the basic format. That's it. So this is I purposely look, I'm gonna give myself 3 slides. Everything else is we're gonna be in the programs doing stuff. So if I open up SPSS. And again, if you're running this through the interface or whatever, and I showed you where to go to get that data set called survey.save. It's just like a generic data set I think I got from some textbook at some point to use. I couldn't even tell you where I got it from. I use it in a graduate stats course that I teach. But you want to have that open, and it's, again, for me, it's in, where is it for me? Here. Here. It's called survey.save. And you open it, it should look like this in SPSS. So it looks like it's 107 variables, and there's, I don't know, 439 responses somewhere in there. It has a bunch of different stuff in it. There's individual IDs. It has the sort of sex of the respondent, their age, marital status, whether they have children or not, their educational level. And the actual levels, if you click on this little 1 to A thing here, it'll show you what those actually are labeled as. So their source of stress, which I think is what this is, whether they smoke, there's a ton of stuff. And then they have all these questionnaires like their optimism, their total mastery, there's all these questions that it doesn't even really matter at this point. There's just a lot. And then each of those has a total that somebody's already computed, like total mastery, total optimism, total. There's all this stuff. So we have that data set open and working with it somewhat. So in Canvas, if you go to the Canvas page, the DataJam Canvas page, and go to the workshops and find my workshop, I think too. It's really easy. So if you go to just type in DataJam, CSUN DataJam, into Google or something.
Okay.
And this is probably at the top. Yeah, the very top. Yep. And then scroll down a little bit. Right at the very top in the student team information, click on that thing, it'll register you for the Canvas page. So right above that, right there. Yeah. That should enroll you. Yep. That should enroll you in the Canvas page, and you will get access to it. These are almost Canvas. If you go to the very top, workshop.
Okay, let me download it.
And find this workshop.
Is there a way to download it? All these things on this website.
We'll get there in a second. Did you already download R?
Yeah, there's download.
Yeah. So if you have just the R shell download, all you do is open it, and that's enough. That'll give you where you're going to go.
And is it on their files?
So if you go into workshop schedule, it actually is in files as well under Data Science Day. And then so just download that. Yeah. You already have SPSS in here? Yeah. Don't you have that just open SPSS?
This is the library.
When did you open it? Oh, I know what. Where did you say?
Oh, it's here. So you have to go.
I can send you the link if you can download it on the iTunes website.
Users,
It's a CSUN.
and then there should be desktop.
I don't have administrators. So I have this doll arm. I mean, it's like, I guess one of the things for usage of this space. Yeah, you can download, oh, are you talking about trying to download arm? I tried to download SPSS. Oh, this one.
It might be fine.
I went to CSUN.edu and then you would download. And then I added the citrus thing, and then I clicked on SPSS. So why did you get it? Mine had the citrus thing at first, but then when I went to instead of my CSUN software, I went to the information tab. I guess it won't let me go to the wall. CSUN.edu/IPR /
You just wanted to put CSUN software down, so CSUN software download.
Yeah, I'm on the software download. /downloads.
All right, so let's move forward a little bit here. So what I want to show you is if you have ever worked in SPSS, even if it's been a while, or if you haven't, a lot of the action in SPSS works in this one button that says Analyze. It's where you go from most everything you want to do, and unless it's like data manipulation, you can go to transforms, other stuff. But if you want to run an analysis, like you're doing any kind of analysis, whether it's regression, factor analysis, whatever it is, it's all going to be done through Analyze. So I thought, let's do something simple. Like if I do general linear model, which is everything, which is going to be SPSS is mostly like your ANOVAs and that kind of stuff. I'm going to go to this like general linear model univariate. All right, so I do that. And then, oops, clicked on the wrong one. Hello. There it goes. So it'll give you a window like this. This is all the sort of point and click stuff. The students that are like in my class, this is what we do like all the time. All right. So this is all just univariate stuff. So you can pick whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. I was going to take like something like marital status as my fixed factor. So we look at this marital status somehow. We did differences in marital status on different things. I was going to look at, so you like, I just happen to know that there's interesting stuff going on. The optimism mastery, not so much, but in positive affect and negative affect. So let's look at negative affect. So does your marital status actually predict differences in your negative affect, like your overall negative emotional state, right? Negative affect. And this is the total of a bunch of questions measuring negative affect. And put that into dependent, okay? And this is the way, if you're doing like a one-way ANOVA, this is how you would set this up. It's pretty straightforward. And whatever bells and whistles you want, like if you want to put a plot or something, or if you want to, if you want options and you want to, get descriptives or effect size or homogeneity tests, these are typical things you include. Whatever you decide you want to do, normally you would do all this stuff and then you'd hit OK and you get output. So for this first part, what I'm saying is sort of get comfortable with SPSS syntax and learn how the syntax is working, because once you start learning that, you realize there's a lot of the same things that sort of apply to other types of code. You start learning to get comfortable with lines of syntax. Is instead of hitting OK, hit paste. And what paste does is it takes everything you pointed and clicked on and it puts it in, it actually opens up a syntax window and tells you what syntax was used to actually run the thing that you just set up. All right, so this might seem like, oh, this is, well, all right, those things before, not a big deal. But things to notice in this and try to get familiar with is what things have to be capitalized and what things don't. Right? So like variable names, you have to write them exactly the way they are. If you don't capitalize things, they're supposed to be capitalized, it won't work. But does everything? What about the stuff that's like in green and red? Do they have to be capitalized? So I can, this is what I mean by break stuff. So if I put this together and I know this works, right? So I can highlight it, I can hit run, it'll spit out some output to me. I'm not getting an error message, so it ran, right? So I know it works. All right, well, just simple things like how important is this period at the end? Is like that necessary? But notice what happens when I do that. All of a sudden the union nova turns red. Right? You're getting it's like hey, don't do that. Right? It doesn't like it. It doesn't like it when you take the period away. And if you try to run it without the period, and this is true of a lot of syntax, like you'll get hung up. Actually, weirdly, even though there's no period, it ran. Right? So even though it was an error to not have a period in there, it still ran without the period. Right? Other programs, that's not going to happen. If you don't have the period in the right place, not going to run. What about what if I the other stuff like what if I wrote uni? Will it work if I have? Come on. I wrote union nova. I can't even spell nova. See, it didn't matter. I put it in as lowercase. Still works. But if I don't know, what about if I put put marital in as all capitals? Oops, marital. Did it run again? I think it still ran.
Oh, I just wanted to tell you, eventually I thought SPSS did pop up.
Oh, good. Yeah. It may be the internet connection or who knows, but yeah. I mean, here I am. The SPSS has gotten better. Here I am trying to break it, and it's still working, even though it's not supposed to. Like all the stuff I'm doing is not supposed to. It shouldn't work, but it's actually pretty robust at like figuring out what you're trying to do, even when you're doing it wrong. That used to not be the case. It used to be a lot more sensitive to that. But you can see so in order to run this thing, what's it actually doing? It's translating. So you wanted to do some sort of an ANOVA. And it said, all right, so I'm doing a UniANOVA, which is their term for a univariate ANOVA, one-way ANOVA. All right, so this stuff you're translating, you're like learning a new language, right? So you know what you pointed and clicked on. Now it's a matter of trying to figure out, well, how did that point and click, convert over to some words in this thing? So each thing, this method equals SF type 3 is not something you clicked on, it's a default. Same thing with the intercept include. But I did go and I clicked on, I wanted effect size. So that's why it typed in this eta squared. I wanted descriptive, so it added descriptive in there. I wanted the homogeneity test, it added that. The criteria is alpha 0.05, as again, is a default thing, and so is design. So pretty much everything that's in here is just a default. As soon as I clicked on UniANOVA and moved those two variables over, it generated like 90% of the syntax just by doing that. All right. But this is actually what's going on behind the scenes. Everything you click on in SPSS is actually generating syntax. It isn't running magically by the buttons you're clicking on. It's actually those buttons just write code. Make sense? So you could have gone straight here and just written this code. If you knew what the code was, you could have just gone straight to syntax window and just wrote it. You didn't have to click on things. But why would I want to do that? So think about all the variables I have in here. There's like 107 or something. If I wanted to do, so that was for total negative affect, and if I wanted to do it for total optimism, mastery, positive affect, life satisfaction, stress, self-esteem, this is social desirability. I don't know what this one is, I forget. I'd have to go back, point and click each time, and start developing some kind of carpal tunnel thing with like repeated motion, movements with your hand, right? Or I could just I could take this whole thing, because it's set up the same way. If I wanted to be predicted by marital status, just I think the other one was like pos aff. If I wanted to look at positive affect instead, I think that was what it was called. I now just ran that whole thing on positive affect, the same model, same everything, without having to then go through and reset everything up back in the point and click method. That makes sense? So using the syntax actually can save you a ton of time. Even though I know a lot of the code, I oftentimes will, if I'm going to be running a bunch of syntax, I'll generate the first one. I'll point and click through the thing to get the first one to make sure that I'm clicking everything that I want. I'll hit paste, and then I'll copy and paste it and just change the variables I want so that I'm getting the exact same run every single time and just changing the DV or something. Make sense? There's a lot of things you can sort of automate and make easier. If you're trying to transform variable, like you want to compute a new variable by combining variables together, like you want to create a composite by adding a bunch of those together. If you're doing that multiple times, you could go through and redo that every single time you transform and do it once. Copy and paste, change the parameters you want, and just run it all at one time. So there's another added bonus to doing this, which is about replication or replicability. So as you do it and you run everything through syntax instead of just hitting OK, it's generating a history of everything that you did, so that 5 years from now, when someone's like, "Hey, what did you do? You remember we did that data set?" And you're like, "I don't remember what I did." There's been a lot of data sets since then. You know what I mean? I don't remember what that data set was about. You can go back, open the syntax, and go, this is exactly what we did and how we ran it. And so you can literally get the exact same output by running it again without having to go through and remember exactly how you worked it out. So it actually helps to. There's a lot of movement towards, like, if you're going to publish a paper and you're putting analyses in that paper, you have to take your syntax and your data, make it available someplace like GitHub so that people can actually go and inspect what you did and see that you got what you said you got. Because there's too many people that are publishing things that can't be replicated, that are causing all kinds of issues. All right, so questions about SPSS stuff. By the way, I didn't click on, when I was analyzing this, I thought there's something that I thought was really weird. I was going to show you because I thought it was odd. In this univariate ANOVA, if I put in the plots and I just move Merrill status over to there, this is new in 25, by the way. You can actually include error bars. You can decide to make it bar charts. That wasn't a possibility before. So in 25, you can now change it to bar charts. You can add the error bars that weren't there before. That's kind of a cool thing in 25. But this has nothing to do with this talk, by the way. This is I thought was funny. So these are different marital statuses, right? Single, steady relationship, living with partner, first time married, remarried, all this stuff. And the actual outcome is total negative affect, like a negative emotional state. What do you think is weird about this? No, I mean, the higher the number, the more negative, right? So the more negative affect they have, the higher the number. But what struck me as odd, I wasn't that surprised to see the separated folks have the highest negative affect. That makes sense to me, right? What did make sense was why the widowed folks were so low. And so I thought, that's just a fluky sort of thing. And I went back and I switched it out to positive affect. And it's the same. They're like the most positive, which I'm like, thumbs up. I don't know who these people are, man, but oh no, I lied. No, they're the same here. They're on the higher end, but it's not as stark as it was before. And the separated people, it makes sense that they're the lowest. But there's some weird stuff with the widow folks in here that they're like, thank God. I don't know, thumbs up. So let's switch over to, so if you have R installed, I'll show you a couple different things. One is, if you just run the R console on its own, it looks like this. It's super bare bones. There's only really, there's a couple things up here but they don't really do much. You really are interacting with just this little red thing here. And you've got to type stuff into this thing, right? And there are certain things that are automatically sort of available when you open this up, but most things that you want to do in R, you have to install packages, which are different things people have like created and made available for people to run analyses and stuff like that. If you can, or if you start moving in sort of more in this direction, something I would recommend is something called R Studio, which is this thing here I'm opening. It's a free thing. It's the exact same thing as this thing. So this little window right here, right, is here. This is the same window, right? But it also has up here, this is script that you can actually write. So let's say as you're typing in commands, stuff that works, you can actually save it as script. So you can actually save the file and come back and just run it later. You don't have to like copy and paste it back into the console every time. Everything that you run, I should clean this out. Everything you run, if I create a variable, if I import a data set, it keeps track of it all over here. It tells me what data got imported, what everything is in the thing here, and it tells me what packages that I've already downloaded that I have for use on my computer here. It just does a lot of nice things that the console doesn't do on its own. So if you're working in that, it's a little nicer to run it through R Commander. I'm sorry, through RStudio. So RStudio is just an overlay. It just helps you organize things as you're running R. It doesn't do anything else except really just make it a little easier to work in the R environment. So what I want to do is something called R Commander. So if you don't have R Commander, which you probably do, if it's the first time you ever used R, the way you get packages, if you're just using the console, the way you get packages into the console is to use something called it's install.packages, and then you have to put the thing you're looking for in quotes. And this is all super case sensitive. So R Commander is capital R and then CMDR. R Commander in quotes and then in parentheses. So install packages and then open parentheses, open quotes, R Commander. If you hit enter, you should get this little thing should pop up. Let's say installing package into, it'll say, all right, well, where do you want to get it from? So if you're installing it, what's the source you want to get it from, like where? So it doesn't matter a whole lot. Just pick one that's like whatever the closest to you. So go down like to US. Pick one of the US's, like here's one in California. That's probably the best one, just because it's the closest mirror, they call it, right? So you click on that, hit OK. Once you do that, it should then start doing it. Now the reason, so mine took very little time because I already had it installed. When you run it the first time, the reason I say that R Commander has a bunch of dependencies, which means, so R Commander starts to install, it says, oh, I also need to install this other package. So when you install it the first time, you'll see it'll say, oh, now installing, and it'll just start going through a whole laundry list of a bunch of other things. Knitter, car, there's a bunch of ones that it'll start to install. Is anybody seeing that now? Right, it's doing that, right?
It says can't find function install package.
It's install packages with an S. I do it every time I put install package because I'm installing just one. What's that? Yeah, no, and that's the only problem with this too is I can't make it any bigger. What I could do is, so like in here, I can make it bigger, I think. Hold on 1 second. So like it's install dot packages dot. Nope. I think I should be able to make this bigger. Hold on 1 second. View. Zoom in. That didn't help a whole lot. There we go. Control plus. Nope, that didn't work. View. Control. Yeah, it's not doing it. Why isn't it doing it? Oh, whatever. Let's see, view in. Trying to make it bigger. Is that easier to see?
Dr. Ainsworth.
Mm-hmm.
I think my R is out of date. It's like 3.3 or something. So
Yeah, so it won't let you install Commander because the Commander you're trying to get is a new one and it won't work with the old R.
do I uninstall the R?
No. Nope, just when you reinstall it, it'll automatically over install the previous one. Yeah, because I had something happen to me. I had 3.4.3 was like what I had on my computer, and it said it couldn't run the Commander on that version. So I updated it. It's now 3.5.1 or something like that, and now it works. But yeah, anyway, so is that easier to see? Installed up packages and then capital R CMDR with inside quotes. And it should go again. It's installing all these dependencies, and then you'll get back to this little flashy thing like it's done, like it's like ready for input again. They're at that point. So now you're thinking, all right, cool. So I installed it, right? So I'm ready to go. Well, you installed it, but you haven't opened it yet, right? So it's installed, but it's not doing anything. So now to get it to run, you're going to type in the word here. I'll type it here so you can see it. So here's the difference between if I run this here, and I just write like library, and then RCMDR, and hit enter, it just does it, right? In RStudio, I can do the same thing, the exact same thing I just did, library CMDR, RCMDR. It won't do anything. I can hit enter, it doesn't do anything. I actually have to highlight it and hit run, so it actually runs it like syntax, as opposed to having to copy and paste it in. That it makes it like a script window, so I can actually highlight what I want to run and hit enter, and hit run it. So I can run what I want when I want and keep it. I can keep it all and save it. I don't have to copy it over. So if you run it in RStudio, just highlight it and hit that little run button.
Should be like right here on top of the script window. This is an RStudio, but if you just have the R, like this R, all you have to do is just type in library, open parentheses, and RCMDR. That basically is opening that library. Library open, it's right here. Library, and then in parentheses, RCMDR. Right here.
There is no package.
Did you install packages? Install that stuff, right? And then, do you use the library? And open parentheses, and it's capital R. And you'll open up packages. This is your API. If there's some other things that you want to install, just that's fine. Just okay. It'll add a couple other things. Eventually, another window.
Oh, yeah, there was mine did too. Yeah.
And that's your R command.
I'm just not sure if that's correct.
So what's a that's RStudio there?
This is just R. This is just the R thing. The RStudio has this thing built into the bottom of it. Like this down here is that same window. But it also has a script editor up here. It also keeps track of everything that's in your environment, like all the variables you create and all the stuff. And like if you want to install packages, or like I can scroll down here. So right now, see how this car and car data is checked? That tells me that those packages are now open through the library that I opened. So it tells me what things are going on. So there's just some like bells and whistles that overlay sort of R. No, RStudio is free. You just gotta download it, install it, and it'll run. It just makes things a little nicer, especially in the beginning when you're first learning the code. Once you get the code to work, you're like, I want to save that. I want to make sure, that I save it. You don't have to keep typing back over and over again. I can, if I highlight this code and run it, it doesn't work. I can change it, highlight it, run it again. I don't have to keep typing it back into the window to see if it works or not. If you did all that stuff, all that happens is you get this thing. All that work for just this. This is the R command. Super depressing looking. It doesn't have any of the sort of the fanciness of like SPSS or those kind of programs. It's super basic. But that's sort of R's thing, is to be simple, basic, stripped down. Because when you open up SPSS, even if you're only doing a t-test, it being open is taking up a ton of resources being open in your computer, right? A bunch of RAM and all that stuff are being used, just being open, even if it's doing nothing. Well, so our sort of thing is we're only going to use what we need to use. That's why you have to install a package if you want to use it. And then if you don't want to use more, you just uninstall it. You know, so R open by itself takes up very little resources, and it's very stripped down, very, very basic. So even its version of SPSS is stripped down and very, very basic. So this is our Commander is like their attempt at sort of a somewhat GUI interface. You know, GUI is, I forgot what it stands for, graphic user interface, is what like SPSS does, because it's really, you click on a button and you think you're controlling the buttons, but really it's just writing syntax. So it's just an interface that writes the syntax for you. Right? That's what this is doing. So how do I work with it? Well, let's say, nice thing is, even if you've never used SPSS, so you don't have it or whatever, you don't like it, it's sort of starting from a new thing. So how do I work with data? Well, the nice thing is I gave you a SPSS data set. So I can go into data, the data button. I can go down to, if you click on new data set, load or merge, this is assuming that you already have the data set sort of working out, or that you're going to type in like from scratch a new data set. We don't want to do that. That sounds awful. You want to go to import data set, and it gives you some choices. You can import it as a text or something like that. You can, it'll read in SPSS data. It'll read in SAS data, Minitabs data, or an Excel file. It'll read in all those different formats. So since we have an SPSS data set, let's open that up. And then it says enter data name for data set. Well, I don't want to call it data set because that's just, it's boring. Everything's called, if all the data sets are called data set. So this was called, I think it was called survey, which isn't much better. And then there's some choices. Convert character variables to factors. What the hell does that mean? So this is an R thing where, like, if you want to be able to run things, if I want to do like an ANOVA or something where I'm comparing groups, if I just number them, like in SPSS, I can use numbers and and I can still tell it's a group, and SPSS is like, yeah, whatever, I don't care. R will get funny about that. If you want to be able to compare groups, you have to label the levels as factors, even though that's confusing because it's not like factor analysis. It's like levels. You have to tell it that there are levels to the variable. So we actually want that. So any variable that has like labels in SPSS or something like that, we actually want it, or value labels, we want it to convert those to factors. It says first column contains row names. Well, no, we don't have row names, right? We don't have anything that's like the left column is naming the rows, except maybe like ID, but we still wanted that to be a variable, so we don't. So I'm leaving that one unchecked. And this says convert variable names to lowercase. Now, this one I recommend. It's not something you have to do. I recommend clicking on it because what that does is you'll get data sets where the variable names are all kind of weird combinations of upper and lowercase letters. And you have to remember that when you're typing in a variable name, exactly which ones are uppercase and lowercase. It becomes really, really annoying. So if you click on this one button, it'll make every variable name all lowercase. So it'll get rid of all the uppercase, lowercase, and everything's lowercase. So you don't have to remember what's uppercase, lowercase anymore. It just levels the playing field for every single name. So I usually will check that off, so it'll do that. So later on when you're trying to write syntax, you don't have to remember the combinations of upper and lowercase stuff. So click on OK. It looks like nothing really happens. Oh, sorry. Once we open it, that'll happen. But the data set, we have to grab the data set. So now you got to find wherever you had the data set saved, which for me was in my class. If you download it, it's probably in downloads or your desktop or something like that. Just find that and hit open it. And there, this is when I say it looks like nothing happened. So all it does is it writes script. Survey. This is R's little thing. It's like their equal sign. It's an arrow pointing that way. That thing is this. It says read SPSS. We tell it where the file is. Row names equals false, because remember we didn't check that. String as factors equals true, because we did check that one. And to lower, which is I want the column names to be lowered, lowercase. To lower equals true, because I ran that as well. But other than that, it didn't do anything. And if you look back at your R window, this thing, it also, actually no it didn't. Oh, because I have it open twice. Hold on one second. I think because I ran it here, it's actually it didn't do anything.
argue with single document. So you get back a little message down here that says, note the dataset survey has 439 rows and 107 columns, which sounds right. It just sort of gives you a little feedback about what you've downloaded. But it doesn't look like much of anything until you go to here and it says like view dataset. And then all of a sudden it says dataset and it says survey here. If you click view dataset, a little window will pop up and it shows you the data that's been pulled in. It doesn't look as nice as it does in SPSS, but it still gives you a little, you can actually go in and not here. There's a way to, in our Commander, to edit dataset. You can actually go through, if you want to change a number or something, you can manually edit it. For the most part, it just runs this thing. So you see how I say it ran fixed survey? I don't want to do that. Rid of fixed survey. So there's a couple things going on that seems a little weird. So it's got the script that it's generating, and then there's this other little window that says R script, that says R markdown. And it's the same thing, but it's got all this other crap in it that I'll come back to in a second and what that does and how that works. But it has the same thing, survey, that we just did, but it's inside these little things. And I'll explain that in a second. We come back to R markdown, but I want to show you some stuff. So let's say I want to run the same thing I just ran a second ago, the one-way ANOVA. So instead of analyze, here's statistics. And a lot of what you want to do for statistics is here. You would go to means, that's what we want to compare. And then one-way ANOVA. See how this looks like? It looks like a sort of drop-down point-and-click menu like SPSS. When you click on that, a little thing opens up. Notice it automatically knows which libraries you need to install to run this ANOVA, and it installs them for you in the background. Because up to that point, I wasn't running ANOVA, so I didn't need those packages. So all of a sudden now I'm asking for an ANOVA, so it installs the packages all like ninja-like in the background, right? And then it's asking you, okay, so enter a name for the model. All right, ANOVA model 1, that sounds good. That works for me. And then pick groups. So anyway, it was marital status. All you gotta do is just click on it. You don't have to move it anywhere. You just highlight it. And then response variable, pick one. I think we had used total negative affect or something like that. Here. And I can ask for things like, do I want pairwise comparisons of the means? Like, do I want to take every group and compare every one to each other? Which is an option in SPSS as well. I'm going to click on that to just show you how it comes out. It's a little bit overwhelming, but I'll show it to you. And then if I hit apply, that's sort of like hitting paste in SPSS. What it does is it actually will write the syntax and put it into the script, but it doesn't actually run it. If I hit OK, it'll actually do both. It'll copy it over and run it at the same time. It's still running or something. I think I might have just. Oh, I think it was stuck because the graphic was opening. Hold on. What were you saying? The output part?
Why from like survey?
Oh, okay, so then go to
Okay. Oh, all right.
that means, and then click on one-way ANOVA, and then all of a sudden all this stuff will pop up here. And then click on marital, and here click on that's like towards the end, total negative aspect. Negative. Yeah, positive. And then click on the pairwise comparisons. Now you might be seeing something that looks a little different than mine. So I noticed I've seen this before too, where you might be seeing this window and you're not seeing this. Would that be not seeing this? So I think that's because this on yours. Why? Because you may not be seeing the messages either, right? On the bottom.
Mine doesn't even have one-way.
You go here, it just said it doesn't have one-way no there. Well, if you look back at your when you installed it, if you look back, there was probably an error somewhere trying to install one of the packages for ANOVA, and that's why it's not available.
Yeah, there's errors on installing our commander period.
Right. So what's happening if you're trying to install like especially on like the library's computer or something like that, they may not let you install into the file you're trying to install into if it's restricted. Right. So if that's true, then there's a file in R that it installs all the packages to. Your administrator had to make that file not under the administrative. I mean, it had to make it open to install into. That makes sense? And then it'll work. Because I had something happen to us when we were having in our offices, we were having R installed, and it installed, and they installed it, but we couldn't install any packages. Like we couldn't update it for anything because it wouldn't allow us to install the packages in because those folders were restricted to admin only. So we had to have them fix that. Yeah, it's sort of a goofy thing. I'm trying to figure out why. Because yesterday when I was running this, it did not show this either, and now it is. It's here. Let's generate the report. I know there's a thing, and I'm forgetting it.
So how can I get one-way ANOVA?
You'd have to go back and hold on one second.
In the install windows. It tracks down to the phone numbers and mask. So what happens, try to install, do the install packages or, maybe you get an error.
And then, like when I don't remember your name, but when you were installing yours, remember that other thing you would have said, can it open R Commander without installing these other packages? You had to hit yes.
Yeah.
So if you didn't do that, you hit like no or something like that, you also may have missed packages in there too. This is a lot of the reason why I think people get freaked out by like R or these kinds of programs. It's this kind of stuff. It's the minutia. Once it works, everyone's like, oh, this is fine. But it's like not knowing why it's not working. It is what people. A lot of times people get people freaked out, and it's like you have to just be patient and just keep trying different stuff. And then when in doubt, find someone who knows what they're talking about and have them fix it for you.
So I know a conflict with some of the polish used by Commander or some maybe a whole list, but doesn't give like the download error and things like that.
That is the error. Like it's saying you cannot install.
It just says that missing.
Right, hit yes. And then hit OK. It's going to have an empty. Okay. Now go back to your R window and see now it's installing a bunch of stuff. So it's those things that were missing is why that thing wasn't done. So we have like a half hour left. Yeah, good.
I'm having the same issue, except when I tried to install the packages, it wasn't specified for every one.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it might be
Oh,
different.
the first thing should say CRAN. It's like CRAN or directory. So leave it on CRAN, hit OK. It should then start to download. Hit yes. And then there, it's OK. And then it should start to, now it's just pick a same thing, the US, California, somewhere in there. That should just fix it. You got the same problem with exports?
Yeah, I do. I have to download a separate thing. That's why we need to.
Because, yeah, it's possible, this is doing the same thing as saying exports are not available 3.5.1.
Yeah.
But that's goofy, 3.5.1 is like the newest thing, it just means that they haven't updated their bit, so there's your argument working. When you go to data, yeah, it's under means. Yeah, it's there now. Okay, perfect, so that was the problem.
Yeah, thank you.
So normally, when you run this, what you'll see in the background here is when, like, if I'm running R Commander and I run any of this stuff, as the script runs here. Well, that's the funny thing I'm just thinking about, because this, I swear to God, this was not there last night. When I was going through making sure that I had stuff ready, like the data set was working, this would, because I used to use R Commander, like when I first started learning this, I don't know, how many years ago, this was even more stripped down than this. It was more basic, but it had a window where the output came out in, and the new version didn't do that until like right now when you're watching and it's there, and I can't tell you how I made it happen.
I need like the actual R Commander window though. Like I highlighted library.R Commander. It run. I got some red text, but like nothing is popped up.
I was up.
Yeah.
I did too.
Loading card packages. Oh, because when you get to the library part, don't put in print the quotes. That's not good. We're gonna terminate. It'll read your stuff.
And is our studio, do I need to have R open, or this is R just as I see it? Gotcha.
The library, and then RCMBR with no quotes.
Okay.
It's still running for whatever reason. It's like this. It's hung up on something. Like that's where it was before. It's just not getting there. Because all this stuff is loaded. You do the same thing. Just let it sit there and do it. Doesn't pop up. Namespace load failed. Valid name is not. So when you install,
just stick around and because of the install and like it refreshed, but it didn't just keep it checked. It looked the exact same, but it didn't.
So I had to figure out if this is like the thing, that there's something you can use this command from a Microsoft. If this were happening to me, I would Google that error. And I would find someone to tell me the problem is, and then I have to fix it.
What is your error?
It's like this TK message box is invalid. Is what is the error message on it. I have no idea what that is.
So since we have, we got like what, 15 minutes or so, 20 minutes. Let's just let's talk about a couple things. So let's imagine a world in which R works on all your computers. Here are some things that you can do and why, like what the benefits are. So you already see the sort of the output's sort of funny, because usually what happens, or what was happening to me last night, which is what I thought was going to be the thing today, was that when you run this, as you run the script, it'll look like nothing happens until you go back to your window, and all the output will be sitting in your like your R. It'll be sitting here. It'll like run everything in here, give you output. Like it spit out this. This is the pairwise comparison thing, with the differences at 95% confident was wrapped around them for every single, because there are like 7-8 groups. So it's every individual paired comparison between all those groups, all crammed into one, one thing. But why all of a sudden today, when I've done nothing different, is it giving me this little window on the bottom? I don't know. But here's all the analysis stuff. Like if I want to know here, like here's the actual the F value, the probability level, like all this stuff is spitting out to me. This is giving me the means of each of the groups that I have. And then here's giving me all the differences with tests, so I can see which groups seem to be different, and it marks it with an asterisk there if two groups are different. So in terms of negative affect, the steady relationship and the married first time, there's a significant difference. And then widowed and separated is significantly different. So for some reason, the separated ones are the most negative affect, and the widowed have the least, which is the weird. I know a lot of separate people that are super happy. I don't know. I guess it depends on a lot of things. So the rest of this, the other thing you can do here that is not like SPSS is that you can test. There's certain things you can test and do that SPSS just doesn't do it that way. So I'll give you a for instance. If you go to do like multiple regression and you want to do like a step function for multiple regression. Notice I didn't say stepwise. Don't do stepwise. Step like a hierarchical function for regression. Normally, what we in SPSS we could like put the different variables in different blocks or something like that and be able to do it. So matter of fact, let's show you the difference. So let's say if I'm in SPSS, so just for the sake of time, just watch and don't do and watch, because I think it'll take too much time. Just watch for a second. If I go here and I want to run multiple regression, I would go to regression, I would go to linear, and then I would pick an outcome. Let's say again we're talking about this negative affect thing, but I want to know, my main thing I want to know is something like, is marital status. Let's say like something like education, because that's at least an ordinal variable. There's something to it, and that's my main thing I want to know. But maybe I want to first control for something like age, and so like if I'm a smoker or not. There's some other stuff in here too. No, let's just say, what's that? This whole thing. So go analyze regression. No, yeah, no. So I'm going to show you an SPSS, and then I'll show you an R commander, so you can see the differences in the output. So this is a regression linear. The total negative affect in there, and let's say I want to, again, if I put in, so the problem if I put in marital status, I can't do that in regression, because it's going to think that marital status is like a continuous variable. I have to break it up into pairs, right? I have to figure out a way to recode it into paired comparisons, which our commander will do for us, but SPSS won't. Make sense? And I'll show you that in a second too. But let's just say the continuous things like the highest education and the first smoker or not. Let's just 0, 1, smoker or not smoker. But again, my main thing, actually, I gotta put age in there. So my main thing is I want to know if adding like education if that predicts negative affect over and above the smoking and age variables. So I'm using those as like covariates, like control variables, and seeing if education adds to it. When I do this in SPSS, what it does is it gives me, it shows that there are two models. It gives me model 1, model 2. Model 1 has smoker and age. And then model 2 has adds in the highest education. Make sense? So it's not clear that it's actually adding this to those in model 2, but it is. That makes sense? Because when I go further down, I can look through all this stuff. It's giving me, is the predictor significant for model 1? Yes. Is it significant for model 2? Yes. But what I really want to know is the change from model 1 to model 2 significant? And I didn't ask for it, but there's a thing called change statistics you can click on in regression. It'll test on this stuff. But what you do in if I want to do the same thing in our commander, what I'm going to do is run two separate models. So I can go through, instead of going to statistics, actually no, I lied. It is statistics. Fit models. I want to go to linear regression. So here, instead of analyze statistics, fit models, linear regression. And again, the interface is super, super simple. And I'm going to do the same thing. I want the response variable, which is the outcome, was negative affect. So I'm going to go down to total negative affect here. And then the explanatory variables we had in our first model was age and smoker. The one thing that it bugs me a little bit about our commander is it automatically puts the variables in alphabetical order instead of data order, which drives me a little bit nuts. But whatever. So you gotta take some things with a grain of salt. But notice there's nothing else I can do here really. It's just that's it. I'm clicking the predictors and the outcome, and I'm going to hit OK. That's going to create this thing called reg model.2. That's the model that I just ran. And it can tell me, it'll tell me the predictors and that kind of stuff. But if I want to be able to know if adding education makes a difference, I now need to run the same model. Yeah, so you go to statistics, fit models, linear regression, and then it was negative affect, T negative affect. Oh, sorry, it's still selected. So the stuff I had in there before is still there, right? So all I need to do now is just click on, it's not educ 2, it's educ 1. I don't know why, so I guess it's not alphabetical order, because...
What was the first model selection?
It was T negative affect predicted by age and smoker. I don't know where the other educ is. Oh, no. Okay, so what's happening here is it's actually I don't know. Why is it not there? So educ 2 is a re-specification of education 1, but I don't know why it's not here. Hold on a second. Well, I think I do know, but I'm just going to select educ 2 to see if that adds into it. So it'll be a little bit different than the SPSS version. But the goal here is that it runs that model with the addition of education there. But it doesn't tell me anything. So it tells me what's significant, but it doesn't tell me if it was significant change. Right? So to do that, you go through this thing, where is it? Under models, I think. Hypothesis tests, and then compare two models. So when you do that, it'll ask you which two models you want to compare. You say those two, like reg 2 and reg 3. Hit OK, and it gives me an ANOVA comparing the two models and the difference. Is there a significant improvement in model 2 over model 1? I guess really model 3 and model 2, how they're numbered. But it actually tells you there's significant change from one model to the next, which is doing the exact same thing that's being done in the SPSS version. It's just you have to work it a little differently. The way you get to the answer is a little different. So since we're running short on time, what was the other thing? So we do a little bit of, getting familiar a little with RCMDR. The thing I can't stress enough is once you get the R commander working, just start clicking on stuff. Start and then if you have some familiarity with SPSS, run something SPSS, and then see if you can figure out how to get it to look the same. Not look the same, but get the same results in R commander. And that's how you learn. That's how most programs that I know how to use, I would get to know one program, be familiar enough with it to know I feel confident in it. And then when I started a new one, I would then always compare that back to the old one to see if I was getting something similar. And then if I wasn't getting something similar, why? what was changing? What was different about the way it was being run? So let's talk. I want to show you a little bit of this thing about R Markdown. So what R Markdown does, and it's sort of built into our commander, this R Markdown thing. What it does is the thing with when using the R console, just a straight console, anything you type into that little window is a command. You can only type in code. Make sense? So that doesn't really help when it's spitting out output. You're running a command, you're getting output, command, output, and it's just running that way the whole time. It doesn't look nice. You're not getting a nice sort of like PDF that has like everything laid out nicely, right? So you can use this Markdown, and Markdown's not something that's only to R. Markdown is something you use where it's like hypertext Markdown language, or what HTML stands for. So when you run, if HTML has two different kinds of information in it, there's stuff that's in between things that are like actual code, and the rest of it's stuff you just see directly through your screen. So Markdown's the same way. You decide which things you want to see as like stuff you're writing to yourself, like titles and other stuff that's Markdown, and then what stuff is in its code that gets run and actually does analysis. The way it separates it in R is the stuff that is like these little three, the three hashtags. Like if I type my name there, this is all outside of the code in our Markdown. So like if I write Andrew Ainsworth here, and then this is R as a character style, it doesn't really matter. I can give it a title, replace with main title. This is my title. All right. So instead of being R script, click on R Markdown, which is the next little button over. You scroll all the way to the top, it should say replace your title. And notice it does that until you get to this thing where it has these three little dashes, and it says R equals false. Anything that's in these three little things is actually the code, the command that's being run as an analysis. Anything outside of that is Markdown that you're going to see directly to your window. So you're like, what the hell does that mean? If I run this whole thing, and it says generate report, the generate report button takes the Markdown language and it spits it to an HTML document for you to see. Instead of coming out in the window, like here, everything I ran just came up in this little window down here. I want a document, something I can print out. Right? I got to take a printout to my professor as part of my homework. Right? I can't just print out the stuff that's being spit out in this window. If I hit generate report, it takes everything that I just did, uses the Markdown language to decide what is being presented as like titles and other information that I want to include as part of my like answers to questions or whatever. And the stuff that's in between those little brackets is so like here I typed in this is my title and that's what it looks like. So what I typed in our commander doesn't look exactly like that. It actually had, this is my title with this line underneath of it, right? Our Markdown knows that anything written at the top of the document that has that double line underneath it is the title of the document, and it puts that like in big, bold letters. Anything with a 3 like this is like, in Word how you have like header 1, header 2, header 3. So this is a 3 asterisk means this is header 3. So if I change this to 1 asterisk instead, it should generate a report that'll have my name now should be bigger because it's now a header 1 instead of a header 3. If you save the R Markdown and open it up into like R Studio, that's where I have this little thing that says knitter. That's where it goes. So now see how my name is bigger. So there's my name. There's my name with 3 hashtags. And there's my name with 1 hashtag. Make sense? So the interesting about that is you can actually use the program knitter, K-N-I-T-R, this thing right here, to tell it what you want to knit it to. So knitting is literally like you're taking a bunch of stuff and you're knitting it together. Like that's literally why it's called knitter. It's compiling the code into an output format that you want. You can have it spit out to a Word document. So it'll actually be in Word, and all of those hashtag values that are in here, where it went, will correspond to the Word header 1, header 2, header 3, 4. It'll actually, whatever format you have those in, it'll put those in those format in Word. And everything that's in a little box that's in this little thing here, like where's my code? Everything that's in here between this like dash 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 R and this dash 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 right here, that's called a chunk. It's a chunk of code that gets spit out into here. So that's the code that I asked for is like here, and it's spit out the output below it. So now I'm getting a thing where it tells me the code I ran and then the output from it. If I ran something that had a graphic, it'll actually stick the graphic in here too. So the graphic gets put in line with all the other stuff as an output. When you run this in R, any graphic gets spit out into a separate window. Right? So there's a graphics window in R that gets spit out to you. And then you have your code and output in this weird little window. You have a different window for graphics. When you use R Markdown and something like knitter, it'll actually put it all into one document, and you can actually then control how the document looks in terms of like margins. You have some control over the sort of style. You can make it prettier than just having it spit out into the window in R and then having to copy and paste it like via text into a document. This is just a nicer way. And the cool thing about R Commander is that the R Markdown and the knitter function is already built into that. So when you open R Commander, those things already get opened. It already knows that when all I gotta do is click on that button that says, once I run all the stuff that I want, I click this generate report, and it's gonna switch from just the R script that it ran before to reading the R Markdown, where you can put in. So let's say I can be like, let's say I want to give myself some like notes, right? Like this is the code to import SPSS into R. And if I generate the report, that note to myself will be there. Makes sense? You can actually title things, write comments about stuff. You can annotate the output that you cannot do when just running it in R. You'd have to literally run it in R, copy the stuff you want out, and then separately type the title. I mean, this is a way of doing it sort of all in one place. So wherever I wrote that, I don't remember where it was now. That was up here. And it's not there. Oh, no, here it is. This is the code to import SPSS into R. Apparently I did it wrong, though, because it shouldn't show the hashtags. No. Why did it show the... I must have wrote it inside of a block or something. No, I don't know why. Let's see if that fixed it. So to sort of rehash, because I know we're out of time. Play around, whatever program you're familiar with, if it's SAS or SPSS or whatever it is, just play around with it. Get used to the code that is inherent in that language. Because the thing about coding is you can learn a language like R or C++ or Pascal or whatever programming language you're going to be learning. That the actual code itself doesn't translate to other software. But the logic does, like how you approach things, the stuff that you do will end up being the same, and learning how to translate between them you almost have to break it to then figure out how to fix it again to sort of learn the process of getting it to work. I can't tell you how many times, trying to work on code, you end up forgetting something, like a period, almost always a freaking period, right? You forget a period somewhere that's supposed to be there and it just doesn't run. And SPSS is pretty good at telling you exactly what line the code stopped working. The regular R shell, the reason I don't like using it is it does not tell you. It'll just say it just won't work. If you use the R, like R Studio, it has a better job of sort of debugging what doesn't work, and it will highlight code that doesn't work, and that kind of stuff is why I like R Studio a lot more than just using the R platform directly. Anyway, if you have questions or something about stuff I went through, if you're trying to if whatever this text box thing that still doesn't work, or if you have issues getting it to run, let me know. I can try to help you figure what the problem is. Usually it's something simple, almost always something simple. It's just not the thing you were thinking of, and the issues that you run into with a PC are going to be completely different than the ones you run into with a Mac running the same thing. It's going to be completely different. So so make sure if you want help with something like that, make sure you specify what kind of computer you're talking about and what the error is, and I can usually help to sort of figure it out more or less. Any questions? I know it's we ran out of time because there's a lot of issues with R, but other questions? And just play around and Google stuff. If you get an error, just Google why am I getting this error message? And a lot of times you'll find 100 other people with the same problem.
Thanks so much.
Thanks. Felt like it was a little chaotic, but so it's all good.
It's okay.
You too. Take it easy. Thanks.
Bye. See you. Okay, we need to figure this out. I have to catch a train, but I need to figure out how this works because I need R for my life and my